What's up, guys? Welcome to the classroom. Come on in. We are going to be taking a look at the most important sermon ever preached. This, of course, is a sermon preached by Jesus himself and is commonly referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. Now, if you open your Bible, you can find this sermon in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. I know it makes sense to start at the beginning, but we're actually going to begin with the end in mind and kick things off at the end of chapter 7. Let's read that together. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall. The sermon is 105 verses across 3 chapters in our modern English Bibles, but in just 4 short verses at the end, Jesus says, okay, here is the point of it all. That point being, hear the words of Jesus and do them. Jesus uses an example of 2 guys whose stories have drastically different outcomes based on one decision, where they built their foundation. Jesus calls one a wise man and one a foolish man. Jesus starts by saying people who actually hear his words and do them are like the wise man, and he built his house on the rock. Notice Jesus does not say a rock, he says the rock. When you see something described as the, most of the time it means there is only one. When you think of things being only one in the Bible, it almost always refers to God or something God established. So the rock equals the words of Jesus. Jesus is aiming to build strong disciples, grounded disciples, rooted disciples, disciples that aren't going anywhere, disciples that can be beaten up by the world and yet stand strong through it all. The only way that kind of disciple is made is by hearing and doing what Jesus is teaching in this sermon. On the flip side, the people who hear what Jesus says but choose not to do it are like the foolish man. This guy built his house on the sand. It's not very hard to understand why Jesus calls this foolish. Think about going to the beach and building a sandcastle. You spend hours and hours on your masterpiece just to have a wave come by and ruin everything you've built in a matter of seconds. That is what Jesus is getting at. Then the sand equals, well, anyone else's words. Disciples with strong foundations build on the words of Jesus, not others. If it isn't from God, it just simply won't last. We started here at the end because Jesus says, whoever hears it and does it will be grounded, strong disciples that won't budge when life slaps them in the face. Some people claim Jesus sets the bar too high in this sermon and that no one can live like he is describing. Let me tell you something. When it comes to understanding the Bible, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter your age, what stage of life you are in, your status. None of it matters. If it is written down in this book, you can learn it and you can understand it. Jesus would not have said, hear my words and do them, if he didn't think everyone could. So then you are left with a choice to make. Will you do what Jesus says or not?